Welcome to Berlin, Germany, home of the best region in the world, at least according to me. There's some close games on the card tonight, and it all builds up to the Clash of Kings. There, I said it, G2 versus Fnatic to finish week 7. In Ready Check today, we'll break down each lane in that matchup and learn a thing or two about teleporting so we can help you guys out in solo queue. This week, it is time for the top teams to prove themselves. Fnatic, G2, and Origin all together at the start of the week, but in the end, only one will stand above the rest. Yesterday, Origin lost to G2. Today, Fnatic or G2 are going to win. So what do we read into this loss yesterday?
I think this is the end of Origin's career, really. You know, after a single best of one, it has now been decided that Origin can't ever compete with the top of the table. It's bad news. But in all seriousness, we have to acknowledge that it was a pretty close game. We saw, I thought, a pretty solid draft overall from Origin, but it felt like that some of the small decisions that G2 were making was what enabled them to come out on top in the end.
Yeah, it's those small micro moments. There's kind of like the glass half full, which is like, oh, Origin looks pretty competitive. But then there's also the glass half empty, which is G2 can play whatever they want. They're hippity-hopping all around the rift, and it doesn't matter.
Defending champions, looking to retain the title. Today they go up against Fnatic. I mean, a lot of eyes on G2.
Well, a lot of eyes are on Jankos, because that boy smurfed yesterday. He was so impressive to me with his early pathing. He showed you why you can't just pick scaling junglers and how to effectively punish them. Like, this boy was 1v9ing, and like I was super impressed with Jankos yesterday.
It didn't even look like a skill shot on that Q. He was just nailing all of them.
Dracos was trying to get him vac banned. Like, wrong client, bro. Let's turn our attention to their opponent today. Fnatic, they're on a 5-game winning streak. They also picked up a win yesterday. They played the Lulu mid. We were sort of trying to crown them like draft kings a couple weeks back, and like we're seeing different flavors from them. But what do you think about Fnatic?
I think the number one takeaway is the fact that Fnatic are better in 2020 than they were in 2019. And as far as they went and how well they performed in 2019, that only means good things for Fnatic fans. The question is, how much better? How much does that measure up against G2? Because again, in top 3, no one wants to be second or third place. Everyone actually wants to be contenders to lift the title.
Well, Frostgren will find out that answer at the end of today in the Clash of Kings. Look, you've thrown Origin under the bus. I know. I'm going to keep doing it until Reddit yells at me. Origin, they're the slowest of the top 3 teams. I did like what I saw from yesterday, but I still feel that they are just one step behind Fnatic.
I think that they're definitely... Yeah, see, it depends on who you ask.
Because the thing is Origin's walking, but Fnatic and G2 are sprinting.
And I mean, I'm in line with Frost, and, you know, we heard DeFisher say, like, I still think there's a top 3. I'm more inclined right now to say there's a top 2, and then there's an Origin close behind them, but... I mean, you also have to group Origin up with Misfits, who's like right on their tail, because something that we've been talking about all day is like, hey, Origin, Misfits is tied, and they also hold the head-to-head.
That's the thing, this isn't a top 3, this is a top 4. And Origin are like, there's a big gap between us and Misfits.
Misfits beat Origin today?
I mean, can they? Absolutely. Will they? That's when I'm like, I really need to think about where I'm going to put the percentages on it.
So give me some percentages. Will Misfits beat Origin today? That's the percentage question.
This is unfair because I don't get to see draft, but I can probably easily predict what an Origin draft will look like.
I would say
60-40?
Yeah, I would say that it's actually yes. I would say that it's 60-40, and like I will say that OG have a draft advantage because to me it feels like they have a lot more options in their draft. However, I think that Razork right now is our 2nd or 3rd best performing jungler in the league. So
big praise.
I think that he has the ability to outperform Xerxes. Whether or not he will is very much dependent on the draft.
But his ceiling, if he performs at his best, if the draft works out,
I think he is a very good jungler.
You could see it happening. Frost, you turned your nose up a little.
Because I think you picked the... I won't use that word. I would have picked Febivin as my highlight, just because I think between Xerxes and Razork, they play such different styles.
Sure.
And I think that if Xerxes gets one of his champions, he can really start popping
That's the problem. One of his champions, whereas I think Razork is a little bit more flexible when it comes to
real flexible on that Sejuani right now.
I think Sejuani's fine.
What I love is that a lot of the games, especially the second half of the day, are going to be very, very important. Let's turn our attention to the rest of the standings. After a disappointing split, Schalke 04, SK Gaming, and Vitality are out of playoff contention. Directly above them, there is still a fairly close fight between Rogue, Mad Lions, and XL. If you assume Misfits, OG, G2, Fnatic go in, of those 3 teams I just mentioned, only 2 of them are going to be able to lock playoffs, and I'm hearing and seeing alarm bells for XL.
Yeah, because they're frankly next on the chopping block since they're 2 games behind. Today is kind of do or die for XL, and even then, their fate really isn't in their hands. If you're an XL fan, it has to be Mad Mad Lions. That is the team that you were hoping trips up because Excel hold the head-to-head. But otherwise, this is dire straits for them.
And the other problem is we've been talking about it a lot yesterday. Excel still have to go through the big three in the top of our standings, and just because of that, they have not been fortunate enough, like Mad and Misfits, to be able to take games off of the big board.
So XL play next week, Fnatic and then G2, then OG and only SK to round it out. So the other thing that we were mentioning as well is that if you're an XL fan, you want Rogue to win against Mad later today. Because of that head-to-head, you want Mad to start dropping down the standings. We'll see as the results play out. I'd like to zoom out and just look at sort of the picks and the player preferences that have warped which champions we see frequently here in the LEC. This isn't necessarily a meta dive, but I do feel that we have a lot of players that stand out on unique champions. You can see behind us, I'm thinking Finn on Kled, I'm thinking Razork on the Echo. What are some of the other champions that come to mind?
That's the key word that you said there, though, players. And I think when we do look at kind of a meta or a macro discussion, you have to start with who are the players in your scene and what are their pocket picks and what are their signature picks. Because for all of the, 20% of games that we see on stage, there's 80% that are happening in scrims, and those scrims can very quickly shape metas, and you might start seeing someone prioritize how a pick works because that's just the champion that they like, and depending on the players in your region, changes how the region thinks about the meta. We saw it in 2015 with Gnar, where the North American and European teams like, Gnar, this champion sucks. Asia shows up and is like, ha, Gnar is actually really good. And I think that these champions are signatures of some of our incredible players, Xerxes and Jankos on his Karthus, Kled on his Finn, Razork on his Echo, and now all of Fnatic on Zac.
I just love this, by the way. You actually said Kled on his Finn, and I actually agree with that entirely. Spend a second talking about Karthus, because it's one of the picks that I think we see a higher priority on in Europe than many other regions. You can see some of the stats on your screen.
Yeah, and I also think that many other regions struggle to know how to punish it. I would say that the LPL would be a region that would probably be one of the best at punishing it because their junglers know how to invade, know how to get in your face, know how to make your life miserable. But I think that many other teams and regions around the world don't fully effectively know how to punish it, and it can be said for many teams in Europe as well, which is why I think it is such a contested pick and why it is so powerful. And I think that the fact that we have so much flexibility in our region gives us a lot of advantages when it comes to international events. And you were talking about the Gnar, but there are so many other examples where Europe comes into the meta with a new pick that you just don't expect. And Pyke top lane was the thing that we had over at MSI. There was the Syndra bot lane that G2 also brought out, and that's just from a single team. There's a wide history of European picks that have done this internationally.
Yesterday, Zac, we've seen him top, we've seen him jungle, we've seen him support. This is a pick that is growing in popularity over the last couple of weeks, and you can just see some of the plays and how impactful he is.
And of course, the mentality is that these tank support picks are finally being punished, especially when they're picked blind. It's not just the fact that Zac is a flex pick, it's also that if you put a Braum down there, you're like, okay, you want to go tank for tank? My tank will outscale your tank. My tank can dive onto the backline, and my tank will survive anything. Let's go, brah.
One last question. One last question. What do you make of the Echo? We're seeing it played a little bit mid, a little bit jungle now, and do you think we're going to see more of this pick?
I mean, I love it into Azir. I think it's great into those type of champions, and the fact that many teams think that Azir is a safe blind pick, you'll start to see it getting punished a lot more. And this is one of the fun things about many of the mid laners that we have in Europe. They love getting their counter picks. They love finding ways on shutting down these perceived safe picks, and I think that it scales extremely well, not only in terms of offering team fight value, but also because of the split push threat that it can provide as well.
Well, there we go. That does it for some of the picks. I'm very excited to see which ones will be played on the Rift today. Let's move on with the show, and I have a question for everyone. Have you ever played a game in solo queue, used your TP, and then sent a bunch of question mark pings? I know I have. Fear not, our good friend Teleportius is here to teach you how to use this highly impactful spell.
Right, come with me, friends. Pretend that I'm TPing into mid lane, because that's the only lane that is relevant. Now, I, Teleportius, am here to educate you on the wonders that is teleport. This summoner spell is a staple in competitive play and has been for a long time. Often, we don't talk about its application, but there are a wide array of uses in terms of how pro players use TP that can inspire you at home as well. Let's start with the basics. TP can be used to get back into lane quickly. Maybe you're in a bad matchup, or maybe you die early. TP is a great way to get an early base, restock some health potions, and get some early atomization to help mitigate the pressure. Also, we often see this on scaling mid lane champions like Corki or Diana, champions that want to focus on farming and completing their items, who can later turn into effective split pushes. However, TP can also be used to gain advantages on the map very early on. Let's take a look at this example from Rogue. The first thing to highlight is that there is a TP difference between the two mid laners. This is common for melee mid laners as they can sometimes get harassed out of lane early. Larssen finds a good opportunity to get a good recall timing and instantly TPs into the mid lane while Azir is still back in base. Knowing this, Larssen looks to shove the wave under the tower and group with his jungler. They then slowly move through the enemy topside jungle, gaining vision and setting up for the dive in the top lane. Kled shoves the wave in, and just as it hits the tower, they execute the 3-man dive, finding a successful kill. With Azir locked under the mid lane tower without teleport, he can't respond or follow the enemy mid as he has to catch that wave. Now, as we mentioned before, TP can also be used to assist in losing matchups. You can punish this though. You can force the losing matchup to TP much earlier with some jungle assistance, giving the winning side the opportunity to return to lane without having to use it, like we can see from G2 here in their week 3 game against Fnatic. Fnatic. Whippo is ganked by Jankos as a wave is hitting the tower. This forces him to back early, and if he doesn't teleport, he'll lose too much in an already difficult matchup. Wonder now has a TP advantage, which can be used to make a cross-map play. As we transition to the bot lane, Wonder's TP is then used to counter a play that Fnatic tried to set up. With no TP or ult on the GP side, Fnatic are left at a numbers disadvantage and fall short on the play. Of course, on the topic of G2, they're one of the best teams at utilizing teleport in the late game. When we look back at their game versus Schalke in week 4, the reason why G2 were able to stay so competitive even after losing so many fights was because of their good wave management and teleport usage. Here we see a bunch of different examples of where they use their TPs to trade objectives whenever Schalke had an advantage on the map. Schalke tried to do Baron, Caps TPs, and looked to trade that for an inhibitor to keep the pressure up. In the same instance, a little bit later, Caps does the same thing in the bot lane, trading the pressure for an inhibitor in the bot lane. Using TPs to trade objectives like this can allow you to stay relevant in the game or even win it, as we do see from an example from Origin up next. Now, one of the most exciting ways to use your TP in the late game is to look for the classic TP backdoor. Origin was being pressured around the Dragon and Baron. When they were at a numbers disadvantage and being forced into a situation where they had to 50-50 a Baron, Upset makes the decision to go for a backdoor play. This gamble paid off in their favor, and Schalke couldn't get back in time to answer. A summoner spell that's so widely accepted has many utilizations that can sometimes go unnoticed, and while we can only cover a few ways today, there are many more in which you can explore and utilize the summoner spell. Now, G2 and Fnatic are two of the best TP users in our league, and tonight they'll be going up against each other in the LEC's Match of the Week.
To revel in glory while being on top, that's easy. Nobody is immortal. No one is unbeatable, and eventually, even the best fall. Staying at the top, that's much harder. When you lead the pack, everyone is your enemy, and whether you like it or not, you've got a target on your back. It might be one series, one game, or one moment. That's all it takes. But it can be your series, your game, your moment. Time to step up or get out. There is only room for one at the top.
Sliver of life to slow, the double flash! Both teams not only want to beat each other, but also want to show off. Now they're gonna fish for another one. They're just getting demands on an instant. Fnatic overstep, not gonna be able to get anything. The shot, the kill! Oh, dance on him!
Winning the LEC title would be sitting back on the throne that I never thought I would be on.
Kinias finished the kill. There's the Sentinel coming in. Rex is taken down with the kickback. Selfmade says not today.
I'm hoping that this is just another 2018 for us where we take everything and we once again take down G2.
Oh, Perks going in though, and G2 shredding through Fnatic.
Fnatic is obviously the second best team in Europe, so we want to make sure that they stay that way.
G2 remain the best team in the LEC.
It's good to be dominant. If anything, it's just what we work for.
These are the two best teams in the LEC right now, G2 versus Fnatic, with the winner taking sole possession of first place. As the kids say these days, it's going to be a banger. There's going to be hype matchups across the board, and we're going to break them down one by one, lane by lane, starting with Bwipo versus Wonder. And how does Bwipo warp expectations in the top lane?
I think the only thing we can say, Frosk, is that this matchup is going to be a banger,
as the kids would say.
It's true. I just proved it.
No, it's just very strange. Speaking of strange, how Bwipo thinks about certain matchups. See that segue, Trevor? That's called flexibility. How he thinks about matchups is so interesting, particularly his Gangplank versus Set 1. Bwipo acknowledges Set's probably broken and he's stronger, but he thinks about it in that if I can maximize the use of my Gangplank passive in this matchup, I can find windows to try to abuse it. And so when you look at Bwipo and Wonder, you have to think, okay, this is how I think the matchup works, this is how Bwipo thinks the matchup works, and this is how Wonder thinks the matchup works. And it just opens up so many other options.
And when you think about their playstyle, what I find fascinating is that Wonder is a jungler that doesn't get a lot of jungle attention, so he plays like that. You know, he often has to play on weak side, he's often playing more defensively, and he has to take sacrifices as a result. Bwipo plays as if junglers don't exist in the game, and he gets to do whatever he wants. Sometimes it's to his advantage, other times it's to his detriment. Now, of course, this is a key part of what makes Fnatic so successful, and a large part of introducing Selfmade to the roster is that he is much better at recognizing when and where Bwipo wants to do these things, so he's there to support him much more often, making a much more fluid and successful early game for Fnatic.
I think it's just the different responsibilities that these top laners have found themselves in for 2020. Wonder has been on ambulance duty. A lot of Soraka, sometimes the Sona,
Sure.
sometimes he gets to flex on the Aatrox, whereas like VODS is saying, Bwipo is taking a lot more of the resources. He's roaming a lot more. He's getting things like the Rengar, the Pantheon, the Zac, the Singe, the Gangplank top, and he's being more of that superstar top laner that we used to know Wonder as.
And of course, Bwipo having that support from Selfmade is something you mentioned. Let's turn our attention to Jankos, the other jungler in this matchup. Frosk, before we talk about the 1v1, what pathing is Jankos introducing to our league?
Yeah, so we're going to walk over here. Hi, camera, come with me. I'm going to teach you about jungle pathing. Now, Shakraz has a great video on this pathing where to cover similar topics, but it is going to be about the wolf start. So roll the clip and we can jump right into it. Now, Jankos does this pathing on the Pantheon in this clip. And why that's important is because Pantheon is a talisman-oriented jungler. He's going for more of an AoE clear. The path is leashless. You start on Wolf Camp. The advantage to having a leashless start is the fact that you don't disrupt your side laners. They can get to the wave, they can get set up. You then do Wolves, Raptors, into Krugs. What you're taking advantage here is that by doing the minor camps, it goes much faster and you take advantage of the respawn timers. If you do red buff, you don't get to go through as many camps as quickly as possible. Now, this allows him to get in position to zone off SK from the tower, grab a Scuttleclap, and even make a successful gank into the mid lane. He then walks back into his jungle, takes his red buff, but you can see that his camps will already be back up and available. And that's the biggest thing about this. It's about the timing, the efficiency, the speed through the jungle. And it gets better. The cherry on top is at 5 minutes, Jankos recognizes that blue buff doesn't really matter for Pantheon, and he actually hands it over to Perks. Because yeah, it doesn't matter on Pantheon, but it certainly matters on a Zoe in the mid lane. And Jankos isn't the only guy who's been doing this. We've seen it from Kadril and from Selfmade. So this is another jungle path that is starting to crop up more in the LEC.
And I've been trying to convince Ender to give me that first blue buff, but he just refuses every time. And it doesn't matter what evidence I put in front of him. But aside from that, it just goes to show how talented of a jungler Jankos is. This guy has been playing for so long. He's basically an old man when it comes to League of Legends standards right now. Yet he's
been playing as long as I've been casting.
Exactly.
And he is still innovating. He is still delivering, and arguably in the best shape he's ever been.
Yeah, and he earned MVP last split. He has to be one of the candidates for this split because of how consistent he's been all split. And I think that this innovation is what makes him so strong as a jungler. But when you contrast that to Selfmade's style, he's a lot more reactive. It's less about coming in with an articulated plan. It's about, I see your plan, Jankos, and now I'm going to figure out a clever way to counteract it and stop you from acting upon it.
Now, part of the reason that can happen is when you look at Nemesis in the mid lane as well, his style, the way he works together with Selfmade, self-made. It could not be more different to Perks. So let's turn our attention to the mid lane, how the two of them are going to match up, and of course how the junglers influence that as well.
So first it's starting on Nemesis. I feel a little bit bad because Nemesis is like, I'm clearly the second best mid laner. And then G2 were like, sir, we have the two best mid laners, and now Perks can get to prove that against Nemesis, bumping Nemesis down to third because this guy is popping off right now. It is a hard flex in the mid lane as Perks is reminding everyone, I'm the real god here.
And what makes this so much stronger for G2, in my opinion, is that they have such an effective mid-jungle duo. Perks loves to roam, right? You can see it just in some of his stats. His K+A at 15 is exceptionally high because he groups up with his jungler and he's like, right, where can we gank? Can we dive bot lane? Can we dive top lane? What can we do? Whereas Nemesis is a lot more planted in his lane. He's like the neutralizer. We were talking about how he likes to go for these picks, the Lulu, the Ornn,
Lulu.
he had another one. Veigar. Things like this that just stop you from doing what you want to do is exactly Nemesis' style. And that's not to say he can't roam. That's not to say that he is incapable of doing what Perks does, but that they have such contrasting styles that it feels to me Perks has way more influence on that.
I wish we had more time to dive into it, but I have to move on to the duos. I know. Let's turn our attention to the duos in the bottom lane because, of course, it is going to be a gigantic advantage to Fnatic.
I got you, Trevor.
There's nobody in the world that will say that Caps plus Mickey are better than Reckless and Hilly.
No, I understand. Fnatic fans, put the keyboards down. I know you're like, these casters, G2 bias. Here we go. Fnatic fans, Reckless is a god right now. His stats are incredible. And the thing is he's been playing for so long, it's almost as old as Trevor. And he continues to, I don't know why this is happening, I'm sorry. He continues to put out ridiculous numbers. Not only can he play weak side, he can play strong side, he can play everything. He can go for the weird picks, he can go for the traditional ADCs.
What are the stats? Did you see him on camera?
I was pointing at the stats, like they're so impressive.
You have to like Vanna White the stats. Now the big stat that we do want to point out is damage percentage, 10th. Frosk, you just told me all these great things about Reckless. He's still on Fnatic, they all do damage.
And this is where Hylissang comes in. He's one of the highest damaging supports in the league, right? Like, what
pumping
makes this
Reckless's numbers down.
And he's been playing Tom Kencha Punch. Like, this man is terrifying. Yes, a lot of criticism was thrown towards him at the beginning of the split because he was making a lot of mistakes. He was dying a lot. But in my opinion, a lot of that came down to his style had to be very different because last year, he and Broxah worked together a lot to move around the map. Selfmade is a lot more independent, which means that when Hylissang goes to these plays, he's often isolated. You can see in this flank, it is working out nicely because he's learning and he's getting better at understanding where he can and cannot set up for these plays and when he has the support to facilitate his level of aggression.
And Zach's support is such a perfect champion for Hilly because Hilly likes to play with his face. He puts his face in it and Zach does wonders for that because it's unpunishable. Now, that said, on the other side, you have to look at Mickey because these are our two best supports in the league. And if Hilly plays with his feet, or excuse me, Hilly plays with his face, Mickey sometimes plays with his feet. Has great hands, but if he's on something like the Tom Kench, like, please, no, Mickey.
If we can zoom out and just look at both teams holistically.
Wait, no, we can't yet because we didn't talk about Caps and we have to because the big swap that so many people have had question marks around. Yeah, it's important because I think the big thing to iterate is that when we look at Caps, he is a very different AD carry to what Perks was. Perks he thinks a lot more, he's a lot more calculated, and he respects his opposition a lot more. Caps is the mechanical ceiling that you always have to check yourself against, but is way more punishable. And that is why this bot lane matchup is so favored for Reckless and Hylissang, because you can just see the difference in experience, and Reckless can match you on the mechanics. So that bot lane is the one that we have our eyes on, that Fnatic can really look to take advantage of in this match.
You can tell just how excited we are to watch this game later today, but it's not the only game on the docket. The action is through the roof. Some of the other matchups today, Rogue versus Mad Lions. That's 5th versus 5th. The winner takes a massive step towards locking in their spring split playoff seed. Misfits versus Origin. A win will put Misfits in the top 3, put egg on the face of Deficio, who is confident Origin will win, and they're looking to defend their spot as one of the top teams. Of course, at the end of the day, G2 and Fnatic will take to the stage to close things out. We have an epic showdown. And also interesting for those of you who don't yet know, Yamato Cannon will be casting his first games with us on the LEC. Look, it wasn't enough to get Schalke to playoffs, but Odoamne has been a shining light in an otherwise disappointing split. Let's see what he has to say before today's game.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Odo, for joining me. As always, pleasure to have you in interviews.
Of course.
Knowing that you guys are out of playoffs contention, I'm sorry, what is going to be your main focus now, playing the games? Maybe experimenting on some stuff?
We didn't really discuss the scenario, that we'll be out of playoffs and what do we play for, but it's kind of hard now to keep the same level of motivation that I had, like personally, for this whole split. My goal personally is just to try to keep up the good level of performance that I had so far, and try to carry it on into the rest of the games that we have this split, like the rest of the 5 games. Because at least, you know, if we're out, I want to still at least try and get some good games in, show maybe some good results against the teams, and maybe pick up some wins, because I don't really want to end the split with, you know, just 2 wins and 16 losses. So I don't know, my personal goal is just to try to keep on performing kind of the same way I performed until now, and it's just, that's it. It's just nothing I can do more.
And you've been very consistent through the whole split among the Schalke 04 lineup. So even through failure, is there anything you've been able to learn this split? Some things you want to confirm for summer?
I guess, yeah, I've been put in positions where I kind of have to do things different than I've been used to so far, because the rosters before I had to have a different role than I had so far. And right now, I feel like I've been more like hands-on, being kind of like a leader with the things I'm doing, with trying to, like, you know, teach my teammates plays or like drill these plays in, and just kind of even through like my gameplay on the Rift and stuff, with the things I need to do to kind of enable my team to do better. So
act like a captain in game.
Yeah, kind of like that. I guess that's kind of the only positive you can get from this wreck of a split.
There you go. Let's focus on that then.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yes, sure.
Good luck against SK today, Odo.
Thank you.
Back to you guys.
It's a difficult conversation to have with a player who has really been a stalwart of European League of Legends. He's been playing professionally since 2014, one of the most respected top laners in our region. And obviously, Odoamne hasn't really been in the limelight or center stage throughout his entire career. He's always been respected and at times feared. Almost everyone is going to remember his time on H2K as one of the most consistent members of the team. Alongside Jankos, Ryu, Forgiven, and Vanda, he managed to make the semi-finals at Worlds in 2016. Odoamne has always been one of those players that helped shape and define what other top laners had to be measured by. But not very often was Odoamne the player you looked at, and you couldn't always say he was the best. But he was up there. He was in the conversation. After a transfer to Splice and now to Schalke, Odoamne is still looking to find the levels of success that he was able to with H2K. He's played 345 professional games, a 57.4% win ratio at the professional level, and this split, he has been the primary and at times only carry for Schalke 04. Yesterday's performance against Mad Lions on Aatrox was another one where Odo was doing his utmost against the Lions, and all split long has been trying to help find Schalke wins. The record of Schalke this split does not accurately reflect their performance, and it has felt to me like he and the team were so close to overcoming the problems needed to be a contender this split. It was not to be. It was not what Odo was hoping for, and you could hear that clearly in the interview with Law. I do have hope for Schalke, and more specifically for Odoamne in the future. I want to see what they can do today against SK, and whether or not they can play Blue Shell to upset any of the other playoff contenders.
Thank you very much. Quick shot. As much of a sad day as it might be for Schalke and SK no longer fighting for playoff contention, it's a very happy day for me in the LEC broadcast, as I am joined for the first time on the caster desk by Jacob, Yamato, Ken, and Mebdi. You're not a guest. You're not here for 10 minutes just to kick us off. You're here for the first 3 games, every single moment. And I'll tell you, just a little preview. We've been practice casting a lot this week. Memes, lots of them. It's gonna be
memes, yeah.
It's gonna be a blast.
It feels good to be able to talk so much. Because on the others are so condensed, you have to be quick, and now you can talk a lot of smack. So it feels good.
It's very true. And you'll have opportunities to smack talk, because we are just about a minute away from picks and bans. But for SK versus Schalke, we talked about it a little before we came on the desk, and it feels like you're not playing for playoffs. Right now, you're not playing to blue shell anybody. But you are kind of playing to prove yourself to the rest of the world, to your team, that you still deserve a spot on this lineup. Because after a disastrous split, something's got to give.
Yeah, for sure. You look at these lineups and you look like, what are they going to do coming into summer? You have to put some question marks. Are they going to keep the whole roster? Are they going to do some changes? Who knows? Everyone here on these rosters are playing for their life. there's no longer the time where we're going to have some fun games at the end of the split, because every game matters in some shape or form, because we are at the point where the league is top level in terms of professionalism.
Absolutely neck and neck.